مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. شهد مؤتمر السياسة الأميركية شهرا مضربا اجتذب فيه مرشحين للرئاسة لا سيما هيلاري كلينتون وجيب بوش نقادا أكثر من المعارضين، وذلك في الوقت الذي راه فيه من كان يطلق عليهم من قبل المرشحون الهامشيون، دونالد ترامب من اليمين وبرني ساندرز من اليسار، يجتذبون إليهم جموعا أفيرة وأعدادا كبيرة في استطلاعات الرأي. إنهم كما يحلو للصحفيين أن يقولوا اتحدون قوانين الجاذبية السياسية. بالطبع ما زال الوقت مبكرا جدا حيث يفصلون عن انتخابات الرئاسة الأمريكية 15 شهرا، لكن ما يحدث الآن مهم جدا، فلنخبون بصدد إمعان النظر في المرشحين والحكم عليهم، وما أن يتكون لديهم رأي لن يكون من السهل تغييره. هل الاندفاع نحو المرشحين المتطرفين مجرد لحظة عابرة في حملتنا الانتخابية الطويلة، أم أنه يشير لشيء أكثر أهمية يتعلق بنظامنا السياسي؟ لمناقشة هذه التغيرات الغريبة والتحولات التي تشهدها الانتخابات الرئاسية، يسرني أن أرحب بخبيرين سياسيين مرموقين هما ريبيكا بيرغ وستيف كليمنز. Welcome back to Dakhel, Washington. I'm sitting with a panel of political experts to discuss the craziness of America's presidential campaign, at least in its early months. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Great to be with you.
So it's still early, 15 months to go before our election, but we have some very odd circumstances on both the right and the left. Let's start with the right. Who is this man who is leading the Republican polls?
Well, Donald Trump, everyone knows him as a very successful businessman and a television personality. Now we are getting to know him as the leader in the Republican primary right now. It's really stunning. You talk to pretty much anyone who works in Republican politics, and they're absolutely flummoxed by his rise, flummoxed really by his momentum, and he shows no signs of going away.
So why is Donald Trump at the top of the Republican polls?
I think there is a real disgust in the United States among citizens about how Washington works and the whole sort of seemingly immovable professional politicians that are here. And so we've talked about this every election, that people try and position themselves as outsiders, people not of this system. But it's always fake because the people we elect are of this system and pretending. Donald Trump is not pretending, and he's saying things that resonate in very blunt ways with a public that is tired of the status quo.
Does Donald Trump have any ideas or proposals that
well,
that really make sense?
He actually did just roll out an immigration policy paper this week, which had some proposals in it that many Republicans are calling unrealistic. For example, he proposed building a wall along the U.S. border with Mexico and having Mexico pay for it. Not really clear how he would accomplish that. The policy paper also tackles issues like birthright citizenship, which has actually started to steer the conversation within the Republican Party.
What is birthright citizenship?
So this is part of the Constitution, actually. The 14th Amendment, if you are born in the United States, you are automatically a U.S. citizen. The concern among many Republicans is that this rule is actually attracting illegal immigrants to the United States so that they can give birth to their children here and have them as citizens. Exactly.
Yeah, anchor babies in families, so that if you get someone in, that's a pathway for other family members eventually to get under the legal protections and support of the United States.
And are these like the most important issues facing the Republican Party today?
Well, immigration, I think, is something that the Republican Party has been struggling with for a long time. I remember seeing after the last presidential election, Senator Lindsey Graham, who's one of the candidates running. No one seems to know he's running, but he's running. But he said, Steve, it's one thing when Mitt Romney lost to be hit by a fast-moving train. It's another thing to be knocked off by a very slow-moving truck, which he was saying is the immigration issue, that Republicans are losing the immigration debate. They, looking at the demographic shifts in the nation, not to make common cause with Latino and Hispanic voters is crazy for any political party. And Donald Trump is just turning that on its head. He says, screw that. Americans are feeling like their jobs and livelihoods and safety are being undermined by immigrants to this country. So he's basically doing the opposite of what the Republican Party has been trying to sort of struggle through for some time.
Basically, in every respect, doing the opposite of what is known to work in politics. He's coming out and flouting his wealth. He's basically flaunting his wealth. He's basically doing the opposite of what you would expect from a presidential politician in every respect.
Does he have proposals on foreign policy and education and taxes and healthcare and the things we look to our candidates?
Not really yet. He hasn't gone into any sort of detail on these issues, and that's something that other challengers keep pointing out, some of the other Republicans who are running, but Donald Trump is sort of making the point that he thinks Americans don't really care about those issues, that they care about someone who would be a strong leader, who has a strong personality, and he certainly has a strong personality. So right now, his bid is mostly personality driven. He says he's going to be rolling out these detailed policy plans as we move along, but we haven't really seen that from him yet.
He did say something very interesting on Iran. He keeps saying this is one of the worst deals ever negotiated, that John Kerry was stupid and incompetent. He calls everybody dummies in the process. But then he said something which is striking, is that if president on day one, he would not rip up the deal, which people like Scott Walker and other GOP contenders said they would. And he says, you don't rip up deals, even bad deals. You walk in, you try and make them better, you look at the details in them. And he was sort of giving a lesson to the country in how to do that. I was very, very surprised. And he said he would police the hell out of it, which for those who support the Iran deal, that's what you would hope any Democratic or Republican contender that takes the White House would do. Police that deal out of it. So I found that beneath the bluster is someone who's thinking seriously, because that was a surprising moment.
Now, so far the Republican establishment, such as it is, didn't take him seriously.
Right.
Should they take him seriously?
Oh yeah, once he said, when he flirted with the idea at the Fox News Facebook debate that he wouldn't promise to support whoever might become the contender. And that was the first question posed by Bret Baier, and said that they left the prospect that he could run as an independent. You know, he's a GOP killer if he runs as an independent. And that is very interesting. So after that moment, and looking at his popularity, the GOP is in a very different place with him, because if they run him out like a buffoon or a clown, then they'll face him, I think, is an independent challenger.
And even his challengers in the Republican primary are starting to take him very seriously, as you see him holding his position atop the polls. Rand Paul took him on during the Republican debate. Now even Jeb Bush, who everyone thought was going to be a prohibitive frontrunner when he was raising millions upon millions, now he has $100 million to his name, counting his super PAC. And he is taking on Donald Trump now. Yesterday at a town hall in New Hampshire, which he held concurrently with a town hall Donald Trump was holding in New Hampshire, a little bit of a head-to-head match there. He actually took on Donald Trump and said he only recently became a Republican and has supported Democratic policies for most of his career. So you're going to start seeing a lot more of that from these other Republicans.
So, like, just generally, step back for a minute, and we'll have the same question about the Democrats when we get to discussing Bernie Sanders, but is it fair to say that each of these parties has a slice, 15%, 20%, whatever it is, a slice of people who are just on the fringe that will go for the most fringe, outlandish, outspoken candidate? And what does that do to the primary system if that is the case.
The interesting thing about Donald Trump's numbers, though, is when you drill down and look at who is actually supporting him within the Republican Party, it's not just the extreme right fringe voters. It's actually a lot of independents, a lot of moderates, a lot of people who lean Republican, who are scarcely Republican. And so he's really drawing support from across the board in a way that is surprising a lot of people.
Both things can be true. There is a fringe that's become more powerful in the age of the internet and social media. They've got a voice and they can animate their ambitions and interests, but that doesn't mean that they're the ones supporting Donald Trump, as Rebecca just said, because you see a real interest in him that I think comes from, when you talk about Jeb Bush criticizing him for not having been a conservative or a Republican all of his time. Many of the people supporting him who were Republicans today were angry white working class Democrats who joined Reagan, who supported Ronald Reagan. So they can shift, so why not Donald Trump? So this notion of a more pugnacious, confident nationalism, it appeals to these folks.
So with 24 other candidates, there isn't a sane, sort of reasonable candidate that will appeal to those people?
I think, look, don't know what will happen with Donald Trump. It's a fascinating thing to see, and I don't want to bet against him right now. But the parts that's fascinating is how John Kasich is moving out of the pack, rising quickly. He was probably one of the more thoughtful, more inclusive, the people talking across socioeconomic lines of race. Said he recently went to a gay wedding. And that he would, love his daughter unconditionally if she were to come out to him as a lesbian. That is a powerful thing to say in front of a GOP crowd, and the fact that he's rising right now shows that there's interesting tricks inside the Republican electorate that many of us haven't paid attention to. So you imagine a Kasich ticket, perhaps Rubio in the VP slot, and you imagine, okay, the Democrats have a tough challenge there if that were to emerge, something along those.
Is there somebody else besides John Kasich who's done fairly well in these early months?
Well, Scott Walker started out doing very well in Iowa. He was kind of expected to win Iowa. Now we're seeing him lose a lot of that momentum. Who? Exactly. In the first debate, a lot of people saw him get up on stage and underperform. He was a little bit boring. He lacked passion. And so suddenly he's losing momentum. And so really the race right now is Donald Trump across the board leading in all of these early states, and Jeb Bush trying to catch up, John Kasich trying to catch up. People still think Marco Rubio might have that chance, but he hasn't been showing any particular momentum in the polls.
Jeb Bush, who should have been doing much better. Remember Paul Simon, the Democratic Senator Paul Simon? He reminds me of that kind of nerdish, wonky.
Ooh, you're killing him. You're killing him. All right, well, we're gonna come back to shift from the Republicans to the Democrats and discuss their own surprise candidate in just a moment. Again, my panel of political experts includes Rebecca Berg. Rebecca is national political reporter for Real Clear Politics. Steve Clemens, sitting to Rebecca's left, is the Washington editor-at-large for The Atlantic and editor of Atlantic Live. So now let's turn from Republicans to Democrats and ask the same question. Who is this guy who is drawing such huge crowds wherever he speaks?
We have Senator Bernie Sanders, a self-proclaimed socialist and someone who actually, in all of his years as a senator, has never identified as a Democrat. He's identified as an independent, but becoming a Democrat now to run for president as a Democrat. And he is drawing massive crowds, as you said, against Hillary Clinton. Part of the thinking with this is that there is no real progressive alternative to Hillary Clinton in this race except Bernie Sanders. So he's sort of taking all of that energy and having it coalesce behind him. But, you know, he is also kind of a progressive icon. He's been around for a long time, been, you know, far to the left for a long time. And so he didn't totally come out of nowhere, but I think his momentum has surprised pretty much everyone.
I mean,
the Sanders phenomenon? What do you think?
He's sort of the, we have a character in American culture named Rip Van Winkle, someone who went to sleep for a while and woke up. And he's sort of the Rip Van Winkle of the Democrats, who was a 1960s protester, a socialist, like Rebecca just said, wants free school, all companies are bad, you know, essentially wants a very different kind of redistributive state, taxing the rich and doing more for the poor.
So he does have ideas and proposals.
He has ideas and proposals. He's come out for proposals on relieving school tuition debt that a lot of people have carried. We have over $1 trillion of debt carried by students in the country that have taken out student loans. And he's done things that sort of have taken it on. But he's a placeholder for what is seen as the highly corporatist regime of Hillary Clinton in waiting. And people like Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's been a real firebrand for more empowerment of the consumer, of the citizen versus big finance companies and others, that feel like there's been a tilt away from citizen politics and more towards large-scale companies and markets and whatnot. So Elizabeth Warren is there. And if Joe Biden enters the race, he'll also most likely come into that space that Bernie Sanders is. So Bernie Sanders is interesting, but the way to think of him is someone who's animating some ideas, but he's also a placeholder.
Okay, we're going to get to the Joe Biden question in a minute, but should the Democratic establishment take Bernie Sanders seriously?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. With him running against Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire and in other polls,
yes. Could he beat Hillary, or do
Especially
Gene
in New
McCarthy
Hampshire.
on Hillary? Just do well.
He could, absolutely. I mean, and as you said, Steve, you look at the polling in New Hampshire right now, he's tied in polls with Hillary Clinton. A poll came out where he was leading Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire. It is not beyond the realm of possibility that he could win New Hampshire against Hillary Clinton. And I think her team has kind of been expecting that from the beginning. They warned that New Hampshire was going to be competitive because he has a regional advantage.
And there are a lot of people come out. But I think the other dimension here that is often forgotten is that the mystique of Hillary Clinton, particularly from the time that she was challenging Barack Obama for the presidency, is how can someone with such staggering name recognition, staggering resources, staggering political consultants, have every tool in the toolkit for running, do so badly with all of that? So the story of Hillary Clinton in the last race is the fall of the juggernaut, and we may be seeing something like that again. So Hillary Clinton today looks like a juggernaut, way ahead in many places, although not in New Hampshire, but it's always this thing of why are they so underperforming? That's ultimately the Hillary Clinton story, and why, whether it's Bernie Sanders or another contender, people ought not to think that race is done in the Democratic side of things.
So this does lead me now to the discussion of the candidate who may not be so new, may not be so fresh,
Bernie Sanders can
but who certainly energizes a part of the party that Hillary Clinton doesn't, and that's the Vice President, Joe Biden. Is he, in fact, seriously considering getting into this race? And what might trigger his decision?
It appears he is seriously considering it. He has been in South Carolina on vacation this month, apparently consulting with friends and close advisors about whether he should actually do this. His son, who passed away earlier this year from brain cancer, advised him before he passed away that he should run for president, that he wanted him to. And so that might be a very big personal factor in his decision. And of course, Joe Biden has run for president before. Obviously, he has that ambition. The question is Hillary Clinton vulnerable? I think we've decided that yes, she is. But also, would he be the one to be able to step in and take advantage of that? And is this the right time for Joe Biden? I mean, he's a little bit older. He's certainly not a fresh face. He's not as progressive as Bernie Sanders either. And so maybe he can't tap into that progressive energy. So I think it's a coin flip right now. I really do.
And what might trigger a Biden candidacy for the coin flip to turn one way or the other?
I think it's already been triggered. I think they already see a space available that, you know, particularly with the email issue and the way in which her team has been unable to develop a pathway to authenticity for her, because Joe Biden is all authenticity. That's all he is. He's sort of the big golden retriever lapdog that wants to lick everybody in the face and connect with them and be out there.
Glad you chose face.
You know, no, but I mean it in a sincere way that he is. You know, many of us that cover this look at him as one of the most natural politicians that connects. And I know, you know, to a certain degree, and I don't know this directly from the vice president, but from people around her, I suspect that they don't see Hillary Clinton as the brightest bulb on the block. So they look at themselves as smart, capable, connecting. And when you hear that, you realize these kind of people who get it, they are absolutely unable to restrain themselves. That's why I think Joe Biden is going to run. He's not making a calculation on whether or not he has a pathway to winning. He will believe he does because she's a failure. That's
you think he's going to run?
Yeah.
Do you think he's going to run?
At this point, I would actually put my money on him not running. It's a little bit late in the game for him to assemble the team he would need to do the work he needs to do, especially because he has a very prominent day job. He can't just relinquish all of the duties of the vice presidency to run for president.
We'll bet.
All right, it's a bet.
And just one more hypothetical. So let's say he does run.
Yes.
What does the president of the United States do when Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden are facing off against each other?
Keep his powder dry as much as possible.
Absolutely, that's what he'll do. He'll actually wish them both well. He'll pull back. I think you won't see a tilt any longer. And defending Hillary on things like the email would have been very uncomfortable for him anyway. So she's made it easier for the president to back off. Although
it would be hard for him to completely remove himself because Priorities USA has already given, so this was the president's super PAC during the last election, his fundraising apparatus. It's already given its blessing to Hillary Clinton because the president apparently didn't think Joe Biden was going to run. Now it's a new element to the equation.
This is a fun race. This shows how democracy is really not a stacked deck. House of stacked cards.
Anybody's game.
Anybody's game. Well, that is indeed one of the lessons we try to project here on Dakhel, Washington, that it is not, as you say, stacked deck, that we have lots of choices in America, and between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, the choices are pretty broad. Thank you both very much for joining us this week. بهذا نصل إلى نهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي أسئلة أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة وخاصة بشأن سياسات المرشحين المستقلين للرئاسة نجاح الشرق الأوسط، أرجو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على عنوان البريد الإلكتروني التالي insidewashington@alhurra.com. معكم روبرت ساتلوف. شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.